Thank you, Marilyn. That is absolutely wonderful. And it's so unusual for me to say Marilyn because there aren't that many of us. So, for those of you who've been with us this week, you know it is now time for the live Q&A. So if you have questions, please put those into the chat and Marilyn will then answer those for you. So while those are coming through, welcome, Marilyn. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Oh, your mic isn't open. If you can just unmute yourself, that will be fantastic. It's underneath the under the screen, and if you hover just along from where it says the TCCHE, there's a grey box where you can click the microphone and it should turn green when you have unmiked. So just underneath where our pictures are on the screen, towards the bottom of the screen, just move your mouse and it will reveal a box and a microphone. Let's see. Oh, I can hear something. Let's see. I'm not sure if you're using a different microphone. Just trying to think. Okay, so maybe I might I might suggest that you just reconnect. So maybe if you press the refresh button or the red telephone, either of those two, and then log back in, and we'll see if that has a better scope for us. And also, just a quick reminder while Marilyn is off, just kind of refreshing, she is running a full 1 day workshop as she was talking about. And we had a quick chat offline. So let me just tell you what she said. I said, can you just give me a couple of things that you're going to be covering in this workshop? So she said, we are going to do a deep dive into the ancient sacred text. There is going to be a mix of meditation and hypnosis. And you've just had a little taster of that already. She says, and that meditation is going to take you into the pure lands. And you're also going to have an understanding of flow and how to deep dive for the gold of the sacred text. So that is on Thursday, the 3rd of September, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. UK BST. And it sounds like it's going to be a really exciting workshop. So if you haven't already signed up, make sure you get on board for that. Okay, Marilyn, hopefully we now have sound. Go for it. Say something.
Hi. Can you hear me? Woo! Okay, great.
Brilliant. Fabulous. Seriously, I love technology. And of course, it has its moments. That's just life.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So we're going to get now. I'm going to start with while we're kind of getting the questions coming in from the chat and the Q&A. There's a question I have to ask you because
Sure.
when we were talking earlier, I was like, oh, you said hypnosis. When I first started out 20 years ago, I went to an organization who had a leisure center and I said, can I leave my leaflets and my brochures? I'm a coach and a therapist. They said, yeah, great, no problem. When I kind of arrived with the pack of leaflets and it says NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, photo reading, Huna. They said, oh, we can't take these. I said, why not? She said, we're a Christian organization. And I was still a little bit confused. And she said, well, you're a hypnotherapist. And I was like, oh, so we're talking religion, we're talking God, and you are doing hypnotherapy. Can you just tell me in your mind how the two blend and why in some areas there's a pushback against it?
Well, I think that that's working itself out, possibly a little bit. I think there is a little bit of a stigma in the Christian world, but part of that is working itself out because of the understanding that you're working with the subconscious mind and that it has a therapeutic purpose. But with hypnosis, you also are, you're dealing with other things. So, other things too that are probably don't necessarily go along with the Christian worldview, but in a lot of what I do in my practice, we do past life regression, which is very important for a lot of people to be able to work through past life karma and things that are they're dealing with to overcome things that are going on in this life. Um, but the hypnosis, and the reason why we're doing hypnosis rather than just a meditation is because of the fact that through the hypnotic suggestions, through the hypnosis techniques, we're trying to also instigate and create the subconscious prompting for people to reach the out-of-body travel state. And the reason for that is because when people are able to achieve the out-of-body travel experience, the mystical journey itself brings people forward in their journey, their spiritual journey towards God. So yes, there are misunderstandings about it, but I try to focus on what works.
I love that. Now, we might start with a small question. What is God? In terms of how would you define or describe God? For you, what is God?
Oh, that's a good question. But I'm going to put that. I'm going to answer that in two ways. For me, God is everything. But in terms of just understanding who God is, uh, again, we're going back to everything, because God is universal consciousness. God is universal being. God is everything that you see, do, smell, taste, touch, existence. God is all creation. I think one of the things that people miss when they take God out of the equation sometimes is that they don't realize, well, you are missing the prime mover. And in science they speak about the prime mover. God is the prime mover. God is the prime mover of everything that we experience and everything that we come across in this existence that we have. And if we do not come back to that root, that foundational understanding, we kind of miss the point. It's like the seed of our existence. So we have to understand um, from whence we came in order to know where we're going. And, I'm not sure why, in our society, in our world today, there is kind of this thing of wanting to take God out of everything. But the reality is that without God being in everything, there is nothing. There's nothing that remains. So you learn this very quickly in the out-of-body travel state. In mysticism, you learn it very quickly because energy is God. All things emanate and come from God. And so um, through the eyes of a mystic, I guess you would say, it's almost like a question of, well, what isn't God? So you kind of reverse the question. So when you put it that way and then think about it in that way, then you might start understanding that the contrary is your answer. What isn't God? When you start beginning to comprehend what that really means, then you can proceed forward. If you try to remove God, you can't really move anywhere because you've just removed the prime mover. The whole reason and the whole essence of where creation begins, where it comes from. Um, it's it's like taking the seed out of your vegetables. It's like taking it's like taking the sperm and the ovum out of every living being. It's forgetting the origins of what life comes from. And so before all those things, God came. So we have a prime mover even before those things. So go back further, go back further, go back further. You know, there's a book I wrote called The Primordial Seed, which goes back to the days before the time of the Garden of Eden, and some very fascinating ancient sacred texts that we still have that discuss this period of time and some of the things that were written about those about what was going on in this primordial world. And you kind of have to read it to believe it, but it's just you know, this idea that we have that that kind of takes us out of the context of human history as, you know, okay, well, everyone who came before us was just superstitious and not so scientifically adept as we are, and you know, and all of a sudden we just emerged and we're so smart, we're technologically advanced, and yet we don't really understand how taking ourselves out of the context of human history and doing that actually dumbs us down. Because when you go back in time and you go back to the primordial world and back to the primordial seed and find out how this all began and how the ancient sacred texts actually still exist to tell us how it all started, and how the heavens and the earth are still maintained, and how it all began, that we're maintained to revolve around one another and remain together, then you realize, gosh, we're not that smart to think that, you know, we can separate it all. You know what I mean? And that, to think that our forebears were not these, you know, because they were brilliant people. They had a different kind of brilliance than we have, you know, because we have the technology, but they had the solitude, they had the mysticism, in part because they lived in a different kind of world.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Our next question is going to the out of body experience. So they say you have experienced. You say that you have had one near death experience. Was it provoked or was it natural? Was it an accident or was it something to do with your health? So, really, how did that near death experience come about?
I had two near-death experiences, and they were both health-related medical emergencies. Yes.
And from your
One,
perspective, do you want to share a little of what your experience was of that near death experience in terms of what you saw, what you felt, what kind of came to you in terms of insights, etc.? Is there anything you want to add?
sure. I'll talk about the second one, which happened in 2003. That one was more in depth. And, you know, in 2001, I was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy and heart failure, and, you know, was being, you know, tested for heart transplant and things like that because it's a very serious condition. And in 2003, um, it had been, you know, the heart had been going down in function and stuff like that. And I was supposed to be going in for some extra stuff and probably going to be flown out to go to the transplant hospital because of all of that. And I think the night before I was going in for that procedure, I had some type of heart arrhythmia, and I get emotional when I talk about it, so I'll try. But it was a beautiful experience. I was suddenly standing, there's some funny parts too, standing at the light, you know, and you know, I was young, it was 2003. And so, you know, most people are like, oh, we're going to hear about the family members, and it's like, no, it was my little dog. My little dog that grew up with me in childhood was standing there in the light, and her name was Joy, and she's standing in the light, and I was so excited to see her because she was my dog for like 20 years. And I knew at that time, because I've been having experiences for like 20 years at that point. And so I knew at that point that you can only go so far before you can't come back. And I had 3 young children at the time. One was just a baby, and they're all adults now. But so I was very, determined that I was going to stick around and raise those kids if it was at all my choice to do so. And, and so what happens is I was taken on this beautiful uh, journey through heaven. I was allowed to fly through all these realms of heaven. It was really beautiful, all these beautiful colors, and I saw many, many worlds. And I was given a little bit of a favor, like I was allowed to go see a little bit more than you normally should be allowed to see. And I was grateful for that. And then I came back and I was shown uh, this it was this thing where you're shown how you're doing on the selfishness, selflessness meter, and
Interesting.
and Jesus appears. The Lord Jesus appeared, and he showed me where I was on the meter, and he showed me where like the world and other people I knew and other things like this were on that meter. And he told me that I had achieved what I had to achieve and that it was my decision. I could go or I could stay. It was up to me. And I said, okay. And then he said, but I want you to know that if you go back, it's not going to change anything dramatically, in terms of like what he had shown me, that the world would still remain a selfish place. I couldn't dramatically change that. That it wouldn't, I wasn't going to be, make, but he was showing me, but if you want to go back, you can do that. And I was like, well, as long as it's my choice, I'm going to go back because I've got to raise those kids, and, and he, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, the order of events here. And he says, uh, he said to me at that point, he said, okay. And he said, well, what I want you to do is I want you to go back and pray to receive a heart transplant. And I said, no, I can't do that. I said, I'm going to pray instead that you spare the life of a perfectly healthy young person who's going to have to just die in a horrible accident so that I can get a heart. And I'll take my chances with this heart I've got. And he was very quiet for a minute. And then he looked at me and he said, I grant that. And I said, thank you. And then he said, then I was seeing more. I was seeing more, about this whole thing about, he said that the purpose of our life on earth was, to go from selfishness to selflessness. And that's what we should be, the simplified version of what we should be understanding about our purpose, and my purpose, that I should be working towards that. And I said, okay. And then he said, so he then asked me that, I think it might have been then again asked me, do you want to go back or do you want to stay? And I said, well, I still need to go back because I've got those 3 kids. And then he took me where we're flying back through the heavens, and all of a sudden we're sitting in this, it's like a little shop, and he's sitting next to me and he's showing me all these books. And at the time of this experience, this was 2003, which was the year the foundation was, founded. So this was like 6 months before it was founded. So you can imagine my surprise. So, we're looking at all these books on this shelf, and he's like, so since you're going back, I'm going to make good use of you. And he's showing me these books, and he's like, those are going to be yours. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like trying to read the titles and stuff because I'm like, okay, well, I better get all of this in my head because how am I going to remember all this? I got to write this stuff, because it's all these books. And what was interesting about it was, over the next few years, as all of this stuff just started happening, I was writing all these things. I said, oh, that was those over there. And that was those that were over there in that room, that he had shown me. And so then I came back to my body. And then I told my husband at the time about it. And then I went into the hospital for the procedure and had the procedure. And, if it had gone the way that they anticipated, I was supposed to be in a chopper flying up to that hospital. But I woke up in the same hospital. And so I asked the doctor, so what's going on? you know? And he said, well, we don't understand why, but for some reason, your heart is doing quite a bit better this week than it was last week. And so you don't have to go there. And the one thing I did forget was that Jesus said right before he left me, he said, I'm not going to heal you, but I'm going to help you. And and so I knew that he had helped me, but I didn't say anything because I knew my doctor was not a fan of the religious thing. So I just kind of kept that quiet. But it was a beautiful, beautiful
Wow.
experience. Never forget it. I'll never forget it. It was beautiful.
Oh my goodness. That is a beautiful experience. I'm glad for whoever asked that question because that's opened up a whole new avenue of conversation. That is amazing.
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
And another of those questions that comes up in terms of the words that we use is you talk about the soul. So how would you describe the soul?
Well, the soul is, the spiritual counterpart that, animates this little physical flask that we walk around in. Um, and, I think too that we lose sight of the fact that, because what we are animating is like one of these multiple personality forms that we occupy throughout time and space. And the soul, it's much bigger than that. We are, the soul contains that memory of all of these flasks, all of these personalities, all of these experiences that we have, uh, you know, uh, contained, experienced, gone through in different incarnations, but also the experiences, that we have had in the mystical realms between lives. And and we have different aspects of our soul, because there are different manifestations of our soul, all the way from this highest self, which is the part of our soul that is closest to God, and then all the way down to this personality fragment that we are down here. And so this soul is so much more than we realize. But we also, by not realizing this, we also limit it so much because we don't realize that by not cultivating the soul, we are not opening the doors of the wisdom that naturally can flow into the soul and thus into us, even in the flask that we occupy now in this moment, of all these things and more. Um, if we are able to detach from that personality as an identity, and that identity of the personality is kind of, it holds us back sometimes because we don't recognize that there is so much more to us than just whatever it is that we identify ourselves to be down here. There's so much more. One of the reasons to take people to the Pure Lands is to kind of get people to start thinking about and identifying with this higher aspects of our existence, because that's what these masters are representing to us. And this is not an unachievable goal. It is something that we are all capable of reaching towards, not only in the fact of that we can reach for their help, but that we can also reach to become that as well, both. And so we do limit ourselves a lot by identifying way too much with this personality that we occupy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, in closing, if there were a final message or something that you wanted to leave the group with, and that's people watching live and also those who are catching this as a recording, what would you like to leave us with today?
Well, I'd like to leave people with the joy and the bliss of the Pure Lands, that there is a place that we can all reach here. We can reach that place here where we can rise above whatever is going on around us in this world. And we can experience what is higher, what is greater, and what is good. And be that, and be in that state of peace, that tranquility, that goodness, that vibration here. We can all do that here on Earth. And that is something that if more of us can do that, you'd be surprised what we can do on Earth. Because it's
Wonderful.
all about bringing, right, it's bringing a little bit of heaven to Earth. And the more of us who do that, the more of heaven we create on Earth.
And that's a lovely synergy of where we ended last night, because Dr. Bruce Lipton was also talking about an aspect of heaven on earth. So that's a wonderful way to both finish yesterday and start our day. Marilyn Hughes, thank you so much. And
thank you.
Very much look forward to seeing you for your full one-day workshop next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you watching, we'll be back probably about 60 seconds from now with our next speaker. So you probably have just enough time to run, grab a glass of water, take yourself to the bathroom, and we will reconvene in a few moments. Thank you.